rest. You'll be dragging around all day, tomorrow again, cranky and irritable. I don't care, the body says, kids go early when...
All right. Thank you everyone for being here. My name is Jesper, and I'm going to be one of the hosts for this evening, together with Beatrice and Ivan, and we're going to have live interpretation and lots of good stuff. So without further ado, I'm going to start the... Can you start the interpretation function, Beatrice? Thank you. So just waiting until we have it. One moment. Good. There we're live. Thank you so much, Nikoko, for sharing this, and then we can start with the live interpretation. All right. So welcome to Resilient Uprising. Just one moment here. So we are part of a global movement rooted in a long history of struggle for justice. Struggles that often fail in the short term, but never gave up. Our name reflects who we are, resilient in the face of defeat and committed to rising again together. Resilient Uprising is built on three core priorities. First, we fight for global freedom of movement. In a world where injustice and inequality often force people to flee, we believe that every person should have the right to move, to live with dignity, and to seek opportunities across borders. This is not just a matter of compassion, it's essential to the survival of democracy itself. Second, we believe that democracy must be reimagined. There's no single model that works everywhere. That's why we support democratic experimentation, building systems that reflect the values and needs of each local context, while holding fast to the universal principles of freedom, justice, and equality. Third, we build networks of mutual support. No movement can win alone. We stand in solidarity across continents, sharing knowledge, resources, and strengths, especially with those facing the harshest conditions. Together, we prepare not only to challenge injustice, but to endure what challenge demands. To make our vision real, our first and most important offering in this training program, Forging the Future. It's space where we learn together, plan together, and begin building the world we believe in, step by step, side by side. We begin with the first module, Grand Strategy, a deep dive into how movements build lasting power. Together, we'll study the patterns of both failure and success, understand different models of social change, understand how momentum and trigger events, polarization, can be harnessed to shift societies. This module is designed to strengthen your strategic thinking and to equip you with tools to lead movements that endure. This is not just resistance, it's construction. We are laying the foundations of a future and is more just, more united, and more resilient than the systems we seek to replace. We are Resilient Uprising, and we are here to rise again and again until the world we believe in becomes a reality. So, thank you so much. I'm gonna be just sharing a few slides to get us started. There we go. So the session today will be about momentum and strategy, and Ivan is going to take us through this set. And the learning goals for this session is discussing both the positive and negative aspects of protest and organization, and we'll dive into that in a 10-minute breakout in just a few moments. And then together with Ivan, we'll start unpacking it together. And then really kind of starting with what is strategy and how it relates to campaigns and tactics, which are the basic ingredients of a really good meal, which is the change we seek, and how we can apply these contexts, and then how we can create the relationships which are needed to enact this. So the structure for the session is going to be, we're going to go straight into breakouts for 10 minutes. And then we're going to, together with Ivan, go through the two dimensions of protest versus organization, and where there are synergies and all of that. We're going to have a short break. And then we're going to go into grand strategy, another breakout. We're going to do some next steps, and for those who want to, we're going to have another 25-30 minutes at the end, where we can further go into some of the topics that we've started unpacking today. So here's the breakout room.
Let me just do
yes.
the intro for the breakout rooms. Is that okay?
Okay, perfect.
Okay, just for the questions, and then you can how should I say explain the technicalities of that. Is that okay?
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay. So I just want to hi everyone. I forgot to say hi. So I just want like a quick, you have a React button down there, and it gives you like a lot of different things that you can use as a reaction. So I just want to hear like how many people here have participated in a formal organization, like you may be a member of like a political party, trade union, association, grassroots organization, but we're looking at formal organization. I just want to see how many people have experience with participating in formal organization. Maybe we can use reaction. Okay, I see Lori already is pointing, Gorian, Michael. Okay, we have quite a representation of people who have participated in formal organization. Now I want to see also reactions. Now let's stop these reactions first. And then I want to see the next reactions. People who have participated or taken part in a spontaneous protest. This is kind of spontaneous gathering of people to protest something or to show their either dissatisfaction with what is going on or like pushing for something. This is not, I'm not talking about organized demonstration that some organizations would do from time to time, but more of a spontaneous protest. Oh, hey, we have quite a few people who have that experience as well. I see Anna, I see John, I see Fede. Okay, Simon. Okay, great. So what we're going to do is, in order to establish our kind of parameters of movement strategy, we're going to look at the two opposite extremes of that, because we were going to mostly focusing on the middle, but let's start from the two extremes. On one end, we have traditional formal organization, like trade union, political party, like NGO, whatever. On the other side, we have these spontaneous kind of outbursts of protest, of self-organizing by citizens. And we want to compare the two. So we're going to focus on different aspects that define these. On one end, we have some positive aspects associated with formal organization. We have some negative aspects. On the other hand, we have some positive aspects associated with the spontaneous protest. We have some kind of maybe things that we don't like about spontaneous protest. So we're going to first talk a little bit about that. Lori, you have a question.
Yeah, in your examples of formal protests, you mentioned like trade unions and other kinds of formal organizations.
Yes.
But when you're talking about spontaneous organization, do you mean like if Extinction Rebellion organizes a protest out in front of Chase Bank? Which do you consider that?
Okay, if you are an organizer of that protest, that's one thing. But have you, my question was, have you participated in something that you didn't initiate that actually swept you in that? So sometimes protests are initiated by formal organizations, but if it's not only their members who are protesting, but rather larger set of, how should I say, citizens, then that is more spontaneous on their end. But there are even protests which are kind of fully spontaneous. I would say, like, for instance, Fridays for Future were more spontaneous than, let's say, Extinction Rebellion. Would you agree with that? So in a sense, we are looking at like a more spontaneous form of protesting. Okay, so we're going to, and again, this is not the reason why we're starting from these two extremes is because we want to focus on the middle, which is most of the stuff that we are talking about. Like say, Extinction Rebellion would be somewhere in the middle. But the reason why we want to start from the edges is that we can actually then focus on the middle. Okay, any more questions? Are we ready for breakout rooms? Good. It's going to be very simple. So we don't want like big, how should I say, explanations or examinations. We're going to, in our breakout rooms, focus on like very simple things, like one word that associates you with a spontaneous protest that you participated in, or with a formal organization. It can be a positive or a negative thing, but we want to keep it like relatively simple. Jesper, do you want to share the technicalities of how we're going to do it?
Yes, thank you. So let's do it like that. Yes, okay. So we are going to use a Miro board. So for the people who are going to facilitate the different rooms, you're going to need to create an account if you don't have one, just as simple as possible. And then the facilitator shares the screen. So let's see that we have enabled that. Beatrice, can you check if we have enabled the screen share? And then the participants will be needing to write in the chat. If they have their own Miro board login, they can do it also. And we'll post the link in the chat just in a moment. Or we can speak and the facilitator will write it down. So maybe we'll need like a minute or so when we're starting just to get it set up. And Beatrice, do you want to give the different dimensions for the different rooms?
Yeah. So you're divided into 4 rooms plus one for French speaking people. So the French people are going to focus on oh, sorry, there is a mistake. However, you are going to focus on adjectives and everything that comes to your mind when you think about protest, and you are going to focus on positive aspects about protests. Room number 5 is in English, and you're focusing on positive aspects about organization. Room number 6 focuses on negative aspects about organization. And then we are having room number 7 and number 8 that are going to do the same. So positive aspects or negative aspects, but you are going to focus on protests.
All right. So let's open the rooms. One moment. So opening the rooms now, and if you have any problems, you can come back to the main room.
Let's go to the first to the upper left, to the orange one, the positive aspects of an organization, and I'll read some of them just to see. Okay, so communication, decision-making skills. It builds community, builds a brand. It has a broader scope of objectives, its sense of control, shared vision, quicker results, builds resilience. Okay, delegation is easier. Political education, shared memory, fantastic. Okay, these are great. Learning and reflecting afterwards. That's great. Let's scroll down and look at some of the negative aspects of formal organizations. Okay, now it's a bit more conservative. It's too slow to respond to changing conditions. Then let's see what is the next one.
Bea, can you change
Administrative.
which one is the interpretation? Thanks.
Yeah.
It has administrative overhead.
Sorry. Okay.
Mhm. Yeah, lacking diversity, a limited set of tactics. It's not flexible. Then sometimes
Ok,
there's
un set de
conflict of
tactiques.
interest. It's limited by the founders, and they are never ready to take illegal positions. So risk averse, we can put it like that. Okay, let's go to the protest and see some positive aspects of the protest that people came up with. Empowerment, community, creating momentum, rising against status quo. It's good, provides space for participation, inclusive, easily accessible, effective. It has collective empowerment again, opportunity for public messages, exciting, fun, creative. People are forced to pay attention. And then let's look at some of the negative things about protest.
We had two on the positive, but we didn't have the negative. And here on the shared screen, we have the one in French. Maybe Francois, you want to do some
Okay, let's
simultaneous
do that.
translation?
Yes. So we were three people. One said she did not see any positive aspect to protest, so just wanted to state that. And the other two, yeah, it's about strengths, clear tension, meeting people. It's direct. It's without compromise. There is visibility, sympathy, clear message, energy. Yeah, alignment.
Okay, great. And so some of the negative aspects of a protest. So Francois, you said that like somebody was saying like there are no positive aspects of a protest, right?
Yeah, but we did not speak about this then.
But we didn't do about negative. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's go to the next slide, and we're going to kind of fill in the rest, because I would like to, maybe in the chat people can type some of the negative aspects of the protest. Maybe we can kind of get like a quick survey in the chat what people believe are negative aspects of the protest, of spontaneous protest. It's traumatizing. Okay. Some protests lose focus. It's not long-standing. It creates public dislike. It can lead to groupthink. And sometimes it alienates people. Okay. Then there are personality clashes, messy organizing, lack of coordination. People get hurt, no plan. Sometimes it becomes violent. There are no next steps. Okay, great. So now we're ready to share the next, our small group takes over. Yeah. Okay, so now we're ready to share the next slide, and we're gonna kind of try to focus on this spectrum. So as I said, we started from these extremes. One is a spontaneous protest, and the other one is formal organization. But when we are talking about strategy, this is our session is about strategy. We are talking about movement strategy, and movement is not like another organization. It's not like a regular trade union or a political party. It's more protesty. It's a kind of more. There is more mass. There more participation. There is more spontaneity to it. But on the other hand, movement is not like a just your everyday protest. It has more structure to it. So in a sense, movement being somewhere between the formal organization and the spontaneous protest actually has that ability to take the best of both worlds, to take positive aspects of the organization, positive aspects of the protest, but also has that danger of taking the worst of both worlds, meaning that to take the negative aspects of formal organizing and the negative aspects of the protest. So in a sense, when we think about formal organization, they are, as we saw from the Miro board, they are more strategic and more long-term and more oriented toward like the goals and towards planning than spontaneous protest is. But on the other hand, spontaneous protest is more spontaneous, as it says, it has higher energy, higher participation, and it is more tactical. It can actually respond to events much more quickly than an organization. On the other hand, spontaneous protest, although it relies on enthusiastic people who support it and through high energy and high participation, it usually collapses relatively quickly and doesn't carry that, how should I say, struggle forward, which is actually what formal organizations are much better at, like to do like more long-term, maybe sometimes sluggish, maybe sometimes too slow, but steady participation. It's the participation that goes over time and is capable of delivering results measured against the goals that were set. So in a sense, when we are building a movement, which is kind of what movement strategy is about, it is not like a strategy of a formal organization, and it is definitely not like spontaneous protest, but it is somewhere in the middle. So in a sense, we're talking about some sort of a hybrid. And so let's go to the next slide and look at some of those hybrids before we move on to the elements of the strategy. So this is, how should I say, for some reason, on this spectrum, everybody is an American except Gandhi. So let's just acknowledge that. But all the other examples here are from the United States. So on the more organization side of things, more structure-based side of things, is the IAF, which was an organization started back in the, like, before I was born, by Saul Alinsky, who wrote Rules for Radicals. So this is probably like, at least in the American context, probably the most well-known structure-based organizing. This is organizing that is really focused on the structure and on building a formal organization. And then we have like, like here we have like Ella Baker and Marshall Gantz. Marshall Gantz is still active, and his Leading Change Network is still working. But then, so somewhere towards the middle, we have people like Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. On the opposite side of spontaneous protest, we have, for instance, an example of Occupy Wall Street, which was, a protest movement that shook United States and influenced the other countries as well, but certainly was instrumental in the U.S. in 2011. So this is where we have like a complete opposite, no structure, no kind of formal organizing. It's more spontaneous and more reactive and more high energy, high participation, but then fizzled out over time. We have, going earlier, we have going back as like, I don't know, like the Clamshell Alliance or some other types of kind of manifestations of protest dating back even to the 60s in the United States. But we can keep that all over the world. It's one of those things that how should I say, is with us ever so okay, like every now and then. Let's go to the next slide. So I'd like to focus now on the things that are associated with these two aspects of more spontaneous, more kind of protest-like features of a movement, and then more formal sides of the movement. So when we're talking about the movement as a hybrid between an organization and a spontaneous protest, which has characteristics of both, that is because movements are very good at doing two things at the same time. First thing is mobilizing, which is kind of doing the outreach, organizing different campaigns that reach people, doing protest marches, rallies, stuff like that. But at the same time, they're very good at also organizing, which means bringing people into the movement, into the structure of the movement. So at the same time, while we're mobilizing, using the structure of the movement to mobilize around it, and this is what makes the movement different from a regular organization. At the same time, the movement is very good at engagement, recruitment, training those people, onboarding them, bringing them in, and then kind of helping them to advance in the ranks and to, how should I say, achieve better kind of, I don't know what's the word, like to be better involved, to be kind of have higher quality involvement in the movement. Let's put it that way. So these are the two types of mobilizing and organizing. So when we talk about these hybrid models, we have to look at, like, first, what are the characteristics, going back to what we did in the breakout rooms. What are the characteristics that we want to emulate? What are the characteristics that we want our movement to have? What are the characteristics that we would like to avoid when we are building that hybrid? What are the things that we would like to see, and what are the things that we don't want to see, either from the protest or from the organization school? And then the second thing is to come up with different activities that help achieve those, whether this is on the mobilizing side, which is kind of geared towards mobilizing outside of the structure of the movement, and then the organizing side, which is kind of how to bring that new energy that was created into the movement and to kind of advance the struggle. Let's go to the next slide, which kind of is the new frontier of the hybrid, which is kind of trying to kind of the strategy of the hybrid of the movement is actually how to build first the theory of change, how we get from point A to point whatever Z of our struggle. Then how do we use escalation? So that means how do we use what we observe is working in the protest, but also especially the symbolic acts. How do we kind of create those moments where the whole population is mobilized behind a set of demands? But also, how do we develop an appropriate structure that is going to support that and benefit from that mobilization? And also, how do we build that core leadership? And how do we then, through that structure and that core leadership, create the movement DNA that then can be front-loaded, and that is usually through the use of mass training or some other form of mass engagement with people that we are bringing in, that we're onboarding into that movement. So what does that mean? Let's go to the next slide. So that means that, you know, the cycle that is created by
You're muted, Ivan.
Oh, how did that happen? Sorry about that. How long was I muted? Just
2 seconds.
okay. So when we think about, like, how is this like process, how does it look like? You know, it starts with like, you know, using nonviolent action to create conditions for what is called the trigger event or the moment of the whirlwind. And then to create popular support for the movement. So this is where movement looks a lot like a protest. You know, so in a sense, like it leans to that side. So it's much more spontaneous, it's much more highly energetic, it's much more how should I say, inclusive. And when that popular support for the movement is created, then the idea is to kind of absorb that into the organization. So the movement then looks more like an organization and tries to kind of channel that energy into the organization so that actually then we can do nonviolent action at a larger scale. So in a sense, our disruptive capacity as a movement increases when we do that cycle. And so let's look at the movement cycle now in the next slide. And we can actually chart that in the beginning phase of the movement cycle. So when we have these small actions that land on a growing public anger, then we can actually have trigger events, then produce what Mark and Paul Engler call the moments of the whirlwind. And this is where mobilization actually increases dramatically. And the movement is then like riding high, and it's actually having like a very big benefits of that peak mobilization. But every mobilization and every peak of mobilization is followed by disillusionment. So what is important is to use that phase so that actually absorption can happen, and that actually the movement can actually bring in groups and individuals into the movement, so that when the movement cycle reaches its peak and goes down, and disillusionment happens, you know, or there is a crackdown, or there is some other reason why the movement is not functioning, and starts going down, then, you know, we have that new energy, we have that new influx of people that actually, you know, we can go into learning, reflection, and then regrowth, so that actually the movement cycle can go into the next phase. So in a sense, that is where movement strategy is actually focused on reconciling these two aspects, the mobilizing and the organizing, the spontaneous protest and the formal organization, in trying to create the balance, or as it is also called, the hybrid of two schools of organizing. Okay, so we are now at the moment where we kind of lay down the foundations, and we kind of have those two aspects of organizing. We kind of looked at them. We saw all the positive and negative aspects, and now we also understand that we are not forced to be purely thinking about strategy of a formal organization, or purely operating in the realm of spontaneous protest, that we can work in the middle, that we can actually think about the hybrid where we pick best of both worlds. That's one thing. Another thing that we also looked at and kind of understand is that, like, you know, there are different things that we can do when we are mobilizing. That's one set of actions. When we are organizing, that's a different set of actions, and they can work together. And we also see when are we going to do which types of when are we going to do mobilizing, when are we going to do organizing actions within the movement cycle. And also another thing that we also know from the movement cycle is that, like, the disillusionment is coming. So whenever we have a high mobilization, it's not going to be forever, but also that disillusionment is not going to be forever. And soon enough, we will be able to kind of overcome that and to continue in the next phase of the movement cycle. So I think it's time for our break now. Are we? Let me check on the, yeah. Okay, so time for a break, and then after 5 minutes of our break, what we are going to go back is we're going to look at the strategy itself and how that front loading of the strategy is done in order to achieve this hybrid form of organizing that is characteristic of a movement. Are there any questions before we go to the break?
Yeah, I have one.
Maybe. Mm-hmm.
Yes, Gorian, and then Alberto.
So the figure, the picture you showed, is it something that like is for these this like hybrid this movement where it's both simultaneous process and like organization afterwards that create this like learning and reflection and regrowth? Because it's easy to come up with an example where you just had the peak, the like honeymoon, and then this disillusionment where like people stop protesting and it didn't bounce back afterwards.
Yeah, no, that happens too. So there are moments where actually movement doesn't survive the disillusionment, but in many cases, people who participated in one form of organizing, even if that form falls apart, then they tend to get how should I say, reactivated somewhere else. So like all of us had the experience of participating in certain either organizations or movements, and then after their collapse we would get involved in something else. So in a sense these learnings are still happening, but yes, you are right, sometimes the movement never survives the downward spiral and then just disappears from the scene. Alberto.
Hi, Ivan. My question is, what are the main causes of this disillusionment? Why do people stop protesting?
Okay, so we actually answered some of that in the negative aspects of the protest. So in a sense, protest is messy. That's what it's traumatizing. They lose focus. It's not long-standing. There is a public dislike and can lead to groupthink. So we kind of answered most of that. So if we rely only on that side of or that form of organizing, which is the protest, those how to say negative aspects are going to manifest themselves. And even when there is no crackdown, which is also sometimes the case, that there is like either a public backlash or there is even like a legal action against protesters, which kind of accelerates their problems or their downfall. But even if that is not there, all these negative aspects are still there. Paul, and then we're going for a break.
Yeah, the projects typically, as they grow and continue in time, always move towards the organized end of the spectrum. Is that typically what happens, or?
So in the long run, this is what happens in the end. So movements that experiment with these hybrids, over time, they kind of institutionalize, they lose that protest edge. And so, for instance, a lot of organizations that are active now, let's say trade unions or even some NGOs that are very, how shall I say, prominent and very, very well established. If you go back to 1970s, they used to be in the streets, they used to be like very, very, how shall I say, militant, but now they lost their edge. And that is because after a while, this combination of like mobilizing and organizing structure and spontaneity, after a while, that structure kind of takes over. But with successful movements, that happens like 10 years, 20 years, or 30 years later. So it's a good problem to have. Okay. Let's have a 5-minute break and then we come back for the strategy part.
Great. So we'll continue at past.
Okay, great. So now we're going to focus a little bit on the strategy because like we see things that we want to achieve. You know, we would like to have a little bit of spontaneity, a little bit of organization. We don't want to suffocate the energy of the people with too much bureaucracy, but we don't want to make it too loose so that it all falls apart. So we are looking at like that hybrid. So now we're going to see a little bit how do we build that hybrid, you know, and let's get back to the slides so that I can actually talk a little bit about strategy, and we're going to discuss that. Okay, so you know when we were kind of comparing these two on that spectrum, you know, we kind of established that like organization is much more strategic than spontaneous protest. But we also saw that, you know, it's kind of sometimes too slow to respond to events or to have the right action ready when things need to be done. And they're like spontaneous protests turned out to be much more effective, much more tactical, you know. So now we have to see like how are we going to build that movement that is at the same time going to be very effective in terms of strategy, but also very effective when it comes to tactics. So let's go to the next slide, where we're going to just go back in history and like, okay, like we have to kind of acknowledge where this whole notion of strategy and tactics came from. So it came from a very so it was born in the military. So this is, you know, back in the like before the, you know, like back in the Bronze Age or whenever, you know, like you know, they really were thinking about, you know, and like authors like Sun Tzu in China who wrote The Art of War, and some like Greeks and Romans and whoever else, they were writing about strategy. Strategy is a Greek word, you know, and tactic also is a Greek word. So that's all coming from that. So in a sense, we have that implicit kind of understanding that strategy is like almost like a pyramid where you have like long-term goals, like major decisions, major plans up on the top of the pyramid, and then tactics are at the bottom. They are in the service of strategy. So in a sense, strategy is, at least according to definition, is a major plan of action that is kind of designed to achieve the long-term goal. And then like campaign is like somewhere in the middle. You know, it connects the tactics, which are kind of like things that we do, to our long-term goal. So in a sense, campaign is a more limited plan of action than the strategy. So when we think about strategy, campaigns, and tactics, we usually put them in that hierarchical order. Strategies on top, campaigns in the middle, and then tactics are at the bottom, and they're in the service of strategy. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, Gorian has been foreshadowing here in the chat. So another way to put it is like when we look at like the level of detail, the length of time, and also the scope, you know, then when we think about like strategic plans, they don't have much detail because they're talking about long-term plans. So these are plans that are extending to for years or something like that. And their scope is like national, even beyond national. So there are some strategies that are international, like they go over borders. When we look at like some mid-level planning, like operational planning, campaign planning, then the level of detail is a little bit higher, and the scope is not years. Now we're talking months, maybe up to a year, because nobody plans campaigns that are going to last for years. Campaigns usually last for a couple of months. And then, you know, sometimes they're national, but sometimes they can be regional. They can be, you know, smaller than a nation. You can kind of focus a particular campaign on a particular region. So that's also possible. And then, you know, tactical level of planning, you know, now we're talking about like high level of detail. So now you have to know who's doing what and when and why, and how much is that going to cost, and like what is going to be needed for that. But we're talking now short term. When we're planning tactics, we're talking like days or weeks, but rarely we talk beyond. And then tactics are always local. If you have like a tactic that is going to be done across the country, these are actually all local tactics that are done simultaneously. And in a sense, you know, whenever we think about tactics, we're talking about like high level of detail. We're talking about like highly localized like plans. And now what Gorian was writing down, let's go to the next slide and just kind of invoke Sun Tzu, who wrote about the connection between strategy and tactics. And in a sense, like this is kind of some, you know, I read some translations of the Art of War that this quote is not there at all. So I'm like, I think some people are like very loose with their translation from, but there are some other translations which have this quote, and that is that strategy without tactics is like, you know, very sluggish, very slow route to victory, and then tactics without strategy, noise before defeat. So in a sense, it looks pretty much like that spectrum that we did from protest to organization. You know, when we're just focusing on our tactics, we're going to have a lot of noise, a lot of high energy, all that stuff, but going nowhere. And then if we are focusing only on our organization, if we're focusing only on the strategic level, then it's going to be like the slowest advancement in the history. Okay, so these are the parameters. Now the question is, you know, does this apply to us? And are we, when we're building movement strategy, are we building that like top-down militaristic hierarchy of pyramids, or are we doing something else? Are we trying to reconcile this tactical aspect and the strategic aspect in somewhat different way? And we're going to discuss this in our next breakout room. So maybe we can go to the next slide. And now this is going to be a proper breakout room, where you have time to talk about that. And we are really focusing here on the aha moment from this. When we think about the way we look at strategy, or the way we try to build our strategic plans, the way we try to develop strategic plan, is there anything from this tension between spontaneous protest and organization that actually can be reflected in the way we are building these as we are building these our plans. So in a sense, we're looking at like aha moments and some things that people are thinking about when it comes to building strategies, because what we are trying to get at is how does the kind of the acceptance or the realization or the notion of the hybrid model of the necessity to reconcile spontaneous protest and formal organization in order to build a movement, how does it influence our thinking about strategy? Okay. Are we ready for breakout rooms? Yes,
All
Ben?
right. Great. I'll just post.
You have a comment in the chat there.
Yeah, I've responded directly to it. So I'm just posting the link to the slides for any of the people who are facilitating breakout rooms. Or if you don't have a facilitator, you can go to slide 16 and just to have that as a starting point. So let's see, we're gonna open the rooms now, and let us know if you have any problems or anything, and we will address it.
Okay.
Okay, welcome back. We're having people coming back from the breakout rooms, and I think we are all back, or should be. So there are a lot of breakout rooms and a lot of discussions that were happening. I'm afraid we will not be able to capture everything, but let's try to hear from some people. Maybe you raise your hands and we'll see how many people want to share some of the aha moments. And then I also encourage people to type in the chat if they had an aha moment, that they can type in the chat as well. But let's hear from few people about the kind of some of the things that that occurred to them during the discussions. It was like an aha moment. Okay, David.
That there's probably a sweet spot between protest and organization to aim for. Like, yeah, because at two ends of the spectrum, try and hit the sweet spot somehow. Yeah, try and hit that.
Okay, yeah, that's very well put. Sweet spot, exactly. Any other aha moments that people would like to share? Okay, there is something in the chat that I would like to share. We all recognize the state of disillusionment in our organization, especially with friends in jail. That's true. That is kind of, I feel that. Then on reflection, we think that the youth don't feel that they have time for non-violent training. People feel there is no time for this graph. Aha, okay. So there is that sense of impatience that the youth have, and kind of it's warranted. So I totally understand that. Okay, any other reflections that people would like to share? Okay, Paul.
In our group, it was remarked that the graph was quite accurate to what happened in our project in the UK.
Okay, great. Laurie?
So my personal aha moment was when you said that the model of thinking about organizing that we usually use is derived from a military context. And, you know, aha, do we really want to continue to use that? And I found that the model that you all laid out today was much more helpful, I think, for the kinds of things that we're trying to achieve now.
Oh, it's not just us. It's all over the place. It's in business, it's in politics, it's in nonprofits. Like that kind of strategic planning thinking is completely, you know, top-down hierarchical and all this stuff. And then it doesn't account for everything that is happening in the street, you know, which is kind of much more spontaneous. But so true. Okay. Okay, there is a question. I wonder who has the time to do both. First engage the people and then train them. That's quite a lot to do, indeed. Okay, let's get back to the slides. I want to close this in like 3 minutes. So, you know, I want to, the next slide, share some of the resources. Now I can finally brag about something that I wrote in 2012. So I wrote this article, The Movement of Homo Sapiens for Eco-Socialist Horizons, for Capitalism, Nature, Socialism. So it's like a proper peer-reviewed column, but it actually explores some of the things around like protest and organization and movement and all that stuff. So I encourage you to read this. It's in the how should I say? We'll put the link even in the chat. And then the next slide is, I guess, the next session. Oh no, so more resources, exactly. So these are books. The book by Paul and Mark Engler, I referenced it to it earlier. The way they talk about it is structure versus momentum. So this is how they do it, but it's also the same thing that we were talking here about protest and organization. And then there is the Momentum series, which are the webinars by the INI Institute that actually tackle that. So I encourage you to look at that too. And then the last thing that we have is the next, I guess the next slide is the next session. Okay. Next session, grand narrative. Who wants to talk about that?
Yes, so we have Sinan here. Do you want to share like a minute or so a bit on what the movements and currents is going to be, if you're able to share, Sinan?
I wasn't at all expecting this. Hello. So there's a recent book called All In, this one, that myself and Mariana Rodriguez we wrote about movement level thinking, strategy and organization and stuff like that. In 2 weeks' time, myself and Alice Gatto will be presenting a session called Movements and Currents, and it's about a little bit of going through history of social movements throughout the world, throughout history, and go over what kind of theories of change they had and why they thought change would happen that way and why it worked and to what extent it worked and so on, just to get us some perspective on what else exists and like what we are building on, right? Because we are at the last step of at least 200 years of modern social movements, and this is what we're going to gather.
Fantastic.
See you.
That's great. On the spot. Thanks, Sinan. And then in a month from now, we're going to do Grand Narrative with Alex Lockwood. And you can attend the talk by registering on the regular link, which is the regular time in the series. And the one in 1 month is going to be 1 hour earlier because Alex needed to be. So but once you register, you should get it in your calendar invite in the correct way. So that's that, and we were wanting to responding to what you wrote in the chat, Gesa, about both engaging people and then training them. Well, that's why we have created the Resilient Uprising. So it can also be hosted by other people in terms of the training. So we would love donations so we can really do this best, so we can expand the team and to do these sessions for the whole year. This is going to be needed. So if you can, $5 or euro a month or 10 or something like that, then that will be really supportive. And thank you everyone who is already doing that. So we'll take a 5-minute break, and then those who want to can stay on, and we're going to explore a bit more on this or mobilizing and organizing. I know that organizing has been a weak spot or a blind spot in where I've been active, and also reflecting together on what we've been sharing with Ivan. So myself and Beatrice will lead the next session, the next 25 minutes, and we'll start at 7 minutes past. So thank you so much, everyone, and maybe we can unmute and say our greetings in our native language. Thank you.
Tusen takk, Jesper.
Thank you.
Merci.
Merci.
Thank you.
Bella, ciao.
Thank you.